What is AI ethics and why is it important for AI for good projects? Isn't any application of AI for public good automatically ethical? My name is Paul Springer, and I am AI enthusiast and co-founder of MI for People. And my today's guest is Professor Dr. Mrinalini Kochupillai, a professor for AI ethics at Technical University of Munich.
Willkommen beim KI für Menschen Podcast von MI for People. Hier tauchen wir in die Welt der künstlichen Intelligenz ein, die unseren Alltag prägt. Erfahrt, wie AI for Good die großen sozialen und ökologischen Herausforderungen unserer Zeit angeht. Lasst uns gemeinsam entdecken, wie KI zum Wohl aller eingesetzt werden kann.
And before we actually start, just two remarks. First one, we are recording today in English, but for our German-speaking audience, we will add German subtitles in the YouTube video. And the second one, as always, I would like to remind you that at MI for People, we are fostering AI for Good movement, and we will be happy if you would like to support this movement. If you want to contribute or even be a part of this movement, you will find all relevant information in the show notes and in the video description. And now I'm happy to welcome you, Nalini.
Thank you.
At our podcast, as today we have a very interesting but also very challenging topic, AI ethics.
Yes.
And you are working in this area. And my first question will be, could you introduce yourself and what you're doing?
Sure. Thank you so much, Paul, for the invitation. And I'm very excited to be here. Yeah. What I'm working on is actually very diverse. As in relation to AI, of course, as you mentioned, I'm working in the field of AI ethics. Specifically, at present, I'm working with the AI for Earth Observation Future Lab, as it's called, where we're looking at how ethical issues and opportunities arise and can be approached in the context of the use of AI in Earth observation research. Mm-hmm. So that's a summary of what I'm doing. And of course, until recently, ethical issues in this field of Earth observation were pretty much unknown, with the exception, perhaps to a small extent, of privacy issues. Mm-hmm. But now, of course, privacy itself is becoming a bigger issue. And in addition to that, many, many new ethical issues are arising. So that is my current focus. In the past, in the context of AI, I've also worked with AI's applications in autonomous vehicles, and to some extent also AI in sustainable agriculture.
Ah, okay, yeah. Sounds cool. And how you came to this research area? Because I mean, I think there is currently no way to study AI ethics. Yeah, and you're researching this. How was your path to this topic?
That's a very good question. Mostly, I should say, very honestly, I just stumbled upon it. My background actually is in intellectual property law. Okay. And I started my PhD by looking into how different emerging technologies are impacting sustainable agriculture, and also how intellectual property laws can be used for promoting a sustainable agriculture, particularly conservation of biodiversity. Mm-hmm. And in my PhD, I found very quickly that intellectual property laws are not adequate. Yeah. And in fact, they are not even designed to promote agrobiodiversity conservation. Uh-huh. So I started looking into different technologies. I started first by stumbling into blockchain. Mm-hmm, and I stumbled into blockchain also in a very funny way, because I bought a bunch of Bitcoin and lost a lot of money. And then I thought, okay, I should find out what is this monster that I have lost my money on. Uh-huh. So then I started really investigating behind Bitcoin. Okay, what is the technology behind it, blockchain technology? And then in a eureka moment, kind of, I felt that, oh my God, this technology and particularly some of its features are very useful for incentivizing sustainable agriculture, particularly conservation of biodiversity. Oh, yeah, okay. And as I continued that stream of research, I also saw that AI is being used together with a blockchain-based backbone. Mm-hmm. For collecting data in a secure way. And then, of course, once you have data that is collected in a secure way, you have a good data set, which we can use again in AI applications.
Ah, okay, I see.
So that's how I ventured into AI and reached the ethics department of the Technical University, working with Professor Christoph Lütke initially. And he was very interested in AI applications in autonomous vehicles. So that's how I started getting into that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sounds cool. And in fact, not typical path. Yeah. But it is a good example of how can you start to work on interesting topics without knowing as a young person what is it at all. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Actually, it's I think in today's world, what earlier we used to say all roads lead to Rome, a lot of roads these days lead to AI.
Yeah. Okay.
And I feel also in the present times, young people should be agile. We have to go out of our very small disciplinary pigeonholes and be willing to explore beyond it, because in a complex world, the solutions often cannot be found within specific disciplinary boundaries alone.
Yeah, it is in fact very important insight and learning in general, but in particular also for non-profit sector, because with all good motivation in this sector, we are often like put in some constraints where we are expected to deal in old-fashioned manner often. And for example, application of AI, it's something completely new. Yeah, it is. For example, even in German law system, it was quite challenging to found MI for people because it was not fitting in this pre-built constraints.
That's interesting.
Pre-built regulations, but at the same time, as you said, so if you want to solve some problems, to create some progress and impact, you must think interdisciplinary. You must think in agile way. You will not find this one solution in this one specific area. You must bring several areas together. And one of these areas is AI ethics. Yeah. So because I think for many listeners and viewers, the ethical issues with AI might be a little bit difficult to understand, except of data privacy. So data privacy, especially with the hype of ChatGPT and using all this information from the internet where people created it. So this privacy issue, I think it is like more or less clear for most of the people. But there are other examples of unethical use of AI. Could you provide some?
Sure, absolutely. So here, I must take one step back again to my previous comment of being open to studying things from multiple perspectives, because bias is one big ethical issue in AI beyond privacy. And it's important for us as human beings who are designing AI, so to speak, to be aware that we as individuals have several conscious and unconscious biases as well. And these biases might arise simply from the way we were raised or the environment we were raised, and may have nothing to do with us wanting to be biased. So I don't think a lot of the AI uses are deliberately biased or unethical, but they become like that simply because I always say that AI is as ethical as the person who designs it. And consciously or unconsciously. So one big example, of course, was of this facial recognition software that was created by this pixel intensification software that was created by Duke University. And there, even popular persons like Barack Obama, they once the resolution of the image was enhanced by the AI, he became a white male.
Okay.
So this had nothing to do with the students of Duke University or the scientists of Duke University wanting that kind of an outcome. It was just that the training data that they used was of primarily white males. And then, of course, came the white female. So Lucy Liu also became a white Caucasian woman. So it's interesting that the biases in AI systems, which can also creep into, for example, when you're hiring people, Amazon's hiring software was very well known as one major and very clear example of AI bias.
Yeah, can you elaborate it a little bit for our listeners?
Sure.
What was the problem with the software?
So Amazon created an AI-based software for hiring people. And based on the data that was used to train it, they were hiring mostly white males. Again, because that is what we see in jobs right now. And of course, there was some talk about it being deliberate in that case. But an industry or a corporation that would deliberately train its hiring software to be biased is really kind of digging its own grave, because diversity is the lifeblood of innovation.
Yeah.
And companies like Amazon or any other company that thrives on innovation wants diversity in its workplace, no? Not just in terms of colors of skin, but also in terms of backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, you name it.
Yeah.
So a hiring software that is not trained on diverse enough data is likely to then hire a specific type of people. And this is going to be at the detriment of the company itself in the long run. So it's important whether or not you are aware of the impact of your biases to make sure that they don't creep into the training data that you're using to train your AI.
Yeah. In fact, so there's this bias thing. It is extremely interesting because so it depends a little bit on the application, but in many cases, AI is just learning experience from the history. Yeah. So, and if the history was biased, AI will also bias. So it is not like AI is bad by itself or people are bad who created, but like we observe that the history was biased. And of course, application of AI has the problematic point that it scales this bias even stronger. Yeah,
exactly.
But at the same time, if taking example of a hiring software, it is like it's not like you becomes even worse. It is like you just replicate your bad attitude before or bad culture or whatever was the reason for this bias originally.
Yes.
Yeah, and you must be extremely aware of it. But I also see here some opportunity because to change culture in the company is extremely difficult task. But to try to augment data for training of AI is still a challenging task, but it is easier as to change the culture. So, if, in my opinion, maybe it is not always applicable, but in my opinion, if you identify the bias in your company or in your profit or whatever you are doing, you can erase negative impact of this bias by applying AI. Yeah, so but it is so I put some hopes a bit in it, but of course the prerequisite here is that people are willing to do so, and also the companies are willing to invest time and money in it. So because it takes additional time to create non-biased or almost no biased AI, or at least better as humans were before. But I think it's not only like a danger, but it is also like an opportunity for us. Yeah,
absolutely. So, to create more ethical business models, for example, or even create more ethical software to put out there in the market. Yeah. But I have a question for you, since you work a lot with Earth observation.
Yeah.
Do you find also data bias within the field of Earth observation, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so Earth observation, we have... So in Earth observation, in the projects we have one project about providing soil quality information to small farmers in developing countries based on satellite data, and one project about identifying marine litter in oceans based on satellite data. And in fact, they are biased, not in the terms of it is like towards people, but towards regions. Yeah, for example, in the soil quality project, we have really a lot of data for Europe, but we are not interested in Europe as a region. We want to help more developing countries. We have quite a lot of data for Africa. What is still, it could be more, but it is quite a lot. But if you try to take a look in Asia, for example, in India, there almost no data. Yeah, of course it is connected to the fact that some people collected this data before, and in some countries there was some efforts to collect this kind of data, and other countries less, or they keep this data private or whatever, so do not make not public for research. But it is like extreme challenging for us, because if we, let's say, create a good model working in Africa, by the way, also in Africa you have different distributions. This country has a lot of data, this country less. Yeah, and you might create a quite good model for let's say the most part of Africa, but if you want to transfer it, let's say, to India, so there's a couple hundreds of training points we have for India is not enough to create a good model. And how do you deal with this? Yeah, yes. Is it like you you don't use it in India. You use it in India, but with clear awareness that the results are not so good, and you clearly communicate it to people. Yes, or how to deal with it. It is not completely clear. It is in fact always a challenge. And another project, it was this marine litter identification. Currently, the satellite images at least public satellite images we can get, they are focused very on regions close to the shores, so like 20-30 kilometers away from the shore. But it is difficult to get data from deep sea, so to say. Yeah, so and there are also marine litter in the deep sea. Yeah, and so if we have like images of ocean where the deepness is not so high, it has already an impact on, if you try to apply the same model on regions where the ocean is, so to say, darker just because it's deeper. Yeah, it is in fact always not so easy. I think in marine litter project, this bias do not negatively affect people, but it still affects the way of what we are doing, and it is a quite challenging task, in fact. Yeah, so but it is like a more technical problem and not less cultural problem, and therefore, so if we identify these biases, we can handle or we can try to find the best possible way how to handle it. Yeah.
That's very cool. In fact, when we talk about AI or ethical AI, what I've noticed is also that so long as you were saying, communicating the limitations of your AI system to the people who might potentially use it. This is already ethical AI because every human system will have its limitations. And then ethics lies in declaring that honestly. Look, this is my limitation. So, for instance, we have nowadays in medical fields, we have methods of detecting cancer or potential for heart disease. And we noticed that because the training data comprises primarily of male patients, the AI is just not able to accurately predict whether a female patient is likely to develop heart problems. So here then, to educate the doctors who are using this kind of system that, look, it will have inaccurate predictions for women. Then the doctors can take measures on top of the AI system to double confirm whether the prediction is accurate or not. So we talk a lot, for example, about explainable AI, which is very relevant in medical fields, for instance, that how did the AI reach its diagnosis? And here then, beyond the explainability, we are talking also in terms of things like verifiability. Can you verify from other tests whether this prediction is accurate or not? And then the more you see verifiability, it is verifiable through objective means that the AI is wrong or right, then over time you know how much and where to trust and where not to trust the system. So it's, I always love to say in my field in research that scientists should be allowed to make mistakes. Because if you don't allow a scientist to make mistakes, we can never have the frontiers of science progressing, right? But once the mistake is identified, to not try to hide it, but to declare it openly, saying, yes, I made a mistake and now we learn from it and move on. And on the other hand, if you already are aware that there are limitations, to declare it. This is already an aspect of honesty, which is part of the 4 fundamental principles of ethics.
I have also one example with medical data, also from MI for People, because it is very similar to what you just said. So we are trying to help hospitals in developing countries by providing AI radiology assistant. The problem is that in developing countries, in many, not everywhere, but in many developing countries, there is extremely lack of radiologists. So they have usually equipment, but there is no person who can evaluate or who was educated to evaluate these images, so that evaluation is made by general practitioners, and they admit it. The accuracy of their diagnosis is considerably lower as of a radiologist. And on the other side, AI is prominent for be able to evaluate radiology images, X-ray images, and make correct diagnosis. And there are even open source models for this. But all these open source models were trained with data collected mainly in US. Yeah, and US has some particular structure of population, and they also have this problem with insurances who can get access to good healthcare, and it is mainly white males. Yeah. And interestingly, so I was talking to radiologists and saying, so, okay, I think here could be a problem if we apply these models to in developing countries. Yeah, so let's say in Africa. Yeah, and they say, as a radiologist and general practitioner will say, no, there will be no problem because the body on the X-ray looks all the same. Yeah, we are all the same inside. So say it is maybe a bit smaller, a bit larger, but you can scale the image. Yeah. But interestingly, I was okay, fine. But then I found some interesting research from US where they took, in fact, this data and these models and they evaluated it towards bias, and they identified that these models have lower probability to make a wrong diagnosis for white males and much larger probability of making wrong diagnosis for people of color and for females. Yeah. And it is interesting because, okay, female male difference on the picture is okay, but it's clear. Yeah. But the difference for why is this, the AI makes the difference between white people and people of color. From the physiological point of view, you cannot explain it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so medical experts will say there is no difference, but AI somehow identifies the difference and works on different populations in a different way. It is like this hidden bias that you observe only if you start to apply AI. Yeah, and they also another research took also this data and models, and they proved that this AI was able to learn the ethnicity from these pictures, and no radiologist can say is it a person of color or not on this image, but the AI can, and because the AI has, I think there's additional danger, but also at some point, in some cases, opportunity of applying AI, so it can create some additional biases that people do not have. For whatever reason, nobody understands why it can learn it or from which features. It's still the research.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, but it is a fact that it is possible. Yeah, and we need to deal with this somehow. Yeah, so we must take it into account. At the minimum, we should research how more bad AI works, for example, for people of color, and be transparent when we're talking to the medical experts who are using this AI. So there is a larger error as you might expect. Yeah.
Yes.
So from general information you have about AI for radiology, AI for X-rays. So I just think. This kind of what we once said, it is like, okay, we replicate the existing biases from the history, so to say, from historical data, but there are also sometimes this door for kind of new biases that it is, again, the bias is not because the AI is biased. The AI still try to replicate the data. They have a lot of white males in the data sets, as they are more used to work with these people, but they also, can learn these additional features to improve the overall accuracy. What leads that it is improving on white male, but rather the accuracy going down on other population groups. Yeah,
that's very interesting. I also had a conversation once with a professor from one of the other universities in Germany. I can't recall the university, as I was telling you. Yeah. But they developed a very interesting software for the allocation of scarce resources. No, one of the scarce resources, for example, are emergency medical staff.
Yeah,
and he was saying that many times hospitals say that people call up and say there's an emergency, we need an ambulance. And it turns out in many instances that it wasn't an emergency. And they developed during COVID and AI to identify from the voice modulation and so forth, whether it is truly an emergency. And I found that a little bit distressing. And the distress was made worse when this researcher told me that actually it works well for the local people, I think from the Netherlands. If they are if they are natives, then it works very well. But as soon as they are immigrants or expats, it won't work so well. So I was like, okay, so then the scarce resources are going to be very well distributed amongst the localites, but the immigrants and the minorities will severely suffer.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting for me in these cases that what are the research questions being asked as well. So one thing that we've noticed a lot in my research is that scientists are looking primarily for very technical solutions to ethical issues, like privacy-preserving machine learning or explainable AI. It's all very highly technical. But sometimes you simply need to modify your research question and then you will find a different answer. Like one big thing we've been discussing in Earth observation research is slum mapping, for instance. And just this label of slum, which is used very widely in the EO research, is stigmatizing.
Yeah.
And given the diversity of socio-cultural setups in the world, different living conditions, an area that appears to be a slum for a European may actually be a pretty decent living area in Africa or even in India. And here then, modifying the research question to not identify a segment or area of population as a slum. Nobody likes to be called a slum dweller. The property values will fall there. Your friends will start making fun of you as being a slum dweller. So there are many implications of that type of a label. But if you were to just modify the label into, let's say, a congested area or area with not enough electricity, then there can be more constructive action taken on the findings. Rather than just as a slum identification, which, as we know, has led to severe consequences like governments just raising the whole area off the ground overnight and rendering all of these people homeless. So some of the ethical issues in AI even don't necessarily immediately need high-tech solutions. Some of them just simply need us to rethink the research question at a very fundamental level, whether asking this research question, given the diversity in the population, as happened with this Netherlands research, will that only propagate injustice? Amongst the population. It will affect democracy at its fundamentals.
Yeah.
Should we even be asking this question? Are there better questions to ask? Or in existing questions, can we ask it better or different so that biases or stigmatization can be avoided? So this, I think, is a very under-studied area of how we can modify just simply the research questions and research approaches without needing to invest millions of euros in finding technical solutions to a problem that may not even be technical in its nature.
Yeah. It is. I think it is always like it should be at least always the companion game between technical solution and the asking correct questions, thinking about impacts, thinking about social implications. Yeah, and and what I also would like to talk with you about is like especially AI for good projects. Some of the examples we mentioned, they are AI for good, some are like AI for business, more or less. But what is what do you think, and if we consider businesses, they have, especially if it is big corporations, they have money, they have people, access to experts. Do work on these ethical issues? Another point, whether they're willing or not to do so, but it seems they're willing. Yeah, for AI for good initiatives, or like for nonprofits all over the world that are not technical and they want to somehow apply or develop AI-driven AI for their purposes, it is often, like a much difficult challenge to master. Yeah. Do you have some idea about some tools, about some not necessarily technical tools. Yeah, how these people could ensure that what they're doing is ethical.
So if I understand that question correctly, you're saying that people are now just using AI or creating AI pretty blindly, and they have no idea of ethical implications.
Yes, partially, especially if they were not confronted with these problems in their actual everyday work. I think it is often like, okay, people see, okay, there's potential, I do something, then I identify there is a problem, and then I try to hide it, or I drop the project at all. And you say, so researchers should be able to make a mistake.
Yeah.
If you are talking about AI for good application where you try to help people, it is often difficult to make a mistake. Yeah, because you lose the trust. And maybe you hurt people you want to help.
Yes, absolutely.
And therefore, in my opinion, this ethical question is extremely important.
Yes.
Or AI that is produced by non-profit sector or for non-profit sectors should be ethical. Yeah,
absolutely.
But it is like challenging. Or do you have any advices or tips how this organization could ensure the ethical usage of AI?
That's a very, very good question. I've been talking to many AI scientists across the board, and it was quite interesting, at least, if not shocking for me, to know that more than 95% of AI scientists have never attended even a lecture on ethics, leave alone go through a structured course on ethics. Mm-hmm. So one cannot identify a problem if one doesn't know what are the potential problems. Mm-hmm. So I think at a country level, at an institutional level, at any level, it is very important that there be large-scale efforts to educate and even make this type of ethics education necessary before any company is, putting any of its products in the market, at least at that stage. Actually, already it should be at the orientation level when a scientist is entering either university or is entering a job space. There should be a significant number of basic lectures on ethics as well as applied ethics lectures which are relevant to that sector. Because AI ethics is a complex animal. It's not, when you talk about the 5 basic principles of ethics, honesty, integrity, fairness, responsibility, privacy, how these play out in different applications of AI can be very, very different. So to actually have scientists understand, first of all, what are these 5 principles? Are they just very abstract utopian principles? Mm-hmm. Or are they really applicable in my day-to-day research? In what way? Mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. And once that training is given and the scientist is made aware that, look, these are the issues that are already known, and now be aware that they can take on different shapes and sizes as the technology progresses. Yeah. Just to sensitize the scientist that this is relevant. It's important for me as an institutional head. It's important for society. It's important for consumers, for governments, even for you personally to not be liable under the law. Then the scientist is more aware. Mm-hmm. So this is one big thing, AI ethics education. It is severely lacking today. Mm-hmm. Second thing that we are doing as AI ethics researchers is we are creating questionnaires. And these are not, again, technical questionnaires, but really questionnaires that are designed to help a scientist introspect on the research that he or she is planning on undertaking. So starting, from, I always like to say the Western approaches to ethics, primarily looking at duties and consequences, can really be complemented by Eastern approaches that look more at intention. Mm-hmm. And they look, of course, at consequences and duties as well, but also they look at knowledge. Have you bothered to acquire the necessary knowledge, including about ethics? And then what are your specific actions in the present? Do your actions align with what your stated intentions are? Do they align with the knowledge that is expected to be applied in your field? And so following this tripod of intention, duties, consequences, we are developing questionnaires for scientists to be able to introspect on every step of their research and understand what can be the potential ethical pitfalls and opportunities. And once they go through these questions in a systematic and iterative way, and where needed, working together with ethicists, it is very, very much more likely that you will not do AI for bad.
Yeah.
And of course, then you have also a legitimate way, or let's say, if nonetheless a mistake happens, despite all good intentions and all well-aligned actions with intentions, mistakes can happen, no? But then you can say, look, that was not my intention. In India, we have a very famous spiritual leader, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. He says, when you make a mistake, don't justify your actions, justify your intentions.
Okay. Yeah,
because an action can always have a flaw inadvertently. But if your intention was good, first, you are less likely to make a mistake, wrong action. And even if you do make it, you can say, look, that was not my intention. Can we go back and correct it now?
Yeah.
Right?
True.
So but here, what I've noticed a lot with AI scientists, especially when they are younger scientists, and they're just enthusiastic about the technology, is that they are not equipped with the knowledge necessary to do responsible research. They don't even know about the best practices in AI as such in many instances,
Yeah.
Like I found out after I started looking a little bit deeper into the technology that when you're testing AI systems, you need to make sure that your test data and your training data must not overlap.
Yes.
Otherwise, there's a problem of overfitting. You will think that your system is better than it actually is.
Yes, exactly.
And I spoke to a pretty senior professor on this, and I said, this is an ethical issue of honesty then. And he was like, no, it has nothing to do with honesty. It's just incompetence. The younger scientists just don't know that this is what they're supposed to do. So this again becomes a matter of educating the scientists and making it necessary in the training of these scientists to tell them that, look, this is the best practice.
Yes.
Please comply with it. Otherwise, you are, in a way, advertently or inadvertently engaging in a dishonest scientific practice. So it's so much about education, and ethics education, unlike education in AI or in blockchain, is easier. You don't need big, heavy-duty machinery to be able to impart that education. You just need a person who has bothered to study ethics, and you work with this person for a while, and you can even collectively identify ethical issues in your fields. So it's not super expensive to do, even for developing countries, but it's necessary for them to invest in the education of their people.
Yeah. And as long as it is not implemented in universities, organizations that hire or work with data scientists on some applications, they should implement these measures to do at least a little bit of education on ethics. Yeah. So in fact, it is something what we must introduce at MI for People. And you brought it already this idea into the into MI for People because you are also part of AI ethics committee in our organization. And so what do you think maybe also on organizational level, as an additional measure, complementing measure to education, could be that organization also introduce AI ethics committee, or take, if the organization is small, maybe ask external help from another organization to check the potential issues that might arise from the idea. Yeah, for example, this idea with identifying emergency level of a call. Yeah.
Actually, I should ask you that question because you were the one who invited me to your committee, and I was very impressed that you came up with that idea. So would you like to share, and also for other companies, small companies or in companies in developing countries, as to why you did that and why they should do it?
Yeah, so I will say so. MI for People tremendously benefit from the AI ethics committee, from different experts in the committee, like you, ethics professor. We have also lawyers or AI experts who are working on quite ethically relevant topics. Yeah, and I think this is a combination of these different views and different backgrounds help us to identify problems better, and also try extremely help us to find solutions for these problems. Yeah, what we as mainly technical people will not able to do. Yeah, and so I will only to emphasize the importance of AI ethics committees, and for organizations that cannot afford to create an AI ethics committee, maybe because of lack of resources or lack of context relevant people, just ask other organization with ethics committee. Maybe they could help and just test your idea from the ethical point of view. Yeah,
that's really cool, because what I loved actually about your committee was exactly that it has so many people from so many different disciplines. No? And it brings us back to that original point of looking at a problem from multiple disciplinary perspectives. And when we do that, you are much more likely to find a real world solution that is sustainable.
Okay.
Now, while if we look at any ethical issue either only from the theoretical angle of ethics or only from a technological point of view, something or the other may get missed around the way. And then either way, we as disciplinary experts, so to speak, we are sometimes like, yeah, that discipline doesn't look at this, and then we forget that we ourselves don't look at that either. So this looking at any problem from various, facets or aspects, and this is what ethics committees should be about, like bringing people from different disciplines and respecting that there are different approaches in each discipline, and together we can find a better solution.
Yeah, it's definitely so, and we are already quite over time as planned, but it was a great discussion. But just the last question. So, what is so we don't know how the future will be, how AI will impact us. There are many scenarios, yeah. But what is your positive future about AI and maybe AI for good?
So I'm actually very optimistic, notwithstanding what may have seemed to be till now. But especially because I see a growing interest in AI ethics, not only amongst the ethicists per se, but amongst people in the government, people in even in big industry and among scientists. It's a growing interest in ethics and sincere interest. And when there is that sincere interest, I feel that really we will start asking the right questions, and we will not develop technology for the sake of technological development alone, but really to address some of the problems that may not be addressable without technology. Like I was sitting on an interview right now for a grant that I recently won for research. And there is a tendency among social scientists to say, okay, is this like a technological solutionism that you think, oh, technology has all the solutions? I don't say that. But I feel that technology sometimes really is the only way to find solutions as well. Yeah. So to find a nice balance, and I think we're headed in a good direction there, that we find a good balance between questions that can be answered through technical solutions and questions that need to be answered through a sociological approach or a more holistic approach beyond technology, looking at the cultural realities. Like in EO, for instance, Earth observation, for instance, I always say look beyond ground truth. Look at ground realities, because the reality doesn't just include the geographical reality, but the cultural reality, the social reality, the economic reality, the political reality. All of these realities together make the ground reality that can very much more influence what AI is being used for, and therefore creating AI for good. So I see a very positive future. I'm already seeing it, for instance, also in farming practices, that AI is being used to help farmers identify diseases using images. And all this is for good. So the intention, I feel, is going more and more in the direction of good intentions. And therefore, we are more going towards AI for good. But with that little caveat that ethics education has to be made mandatory.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a great concluding remark, very positive future. So I also agree. And I definitely agree. We need more education in this direction, in the direction of ethics and ethical usage of AI. So today we had a really great discussion about AI ethics, about AI ethics at AI for Good. What is it? What can what can go wrong with application of AI, what can be unethical. We saw some examples, and but we also discussed the solutions, how to deal with this problem. And I would emphasize that while AI might produce unethical behaviors or unethical decisions, it is on us people to solve these problems, and we definitely can solve them. We must think about it and then implement an ethical AI. And ethical AI will always be a great win for whatever your mission is. Thank you very much for watching or hearing. We see us next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nalini.